grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. Solving the world's problems 12 ounces at a time. It's Dudes and Beer. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Dudes and Beer podcast. I am Chris Jordan, your host. The Dudes and Beer podcast is now officially brought to you by podcastcadet.com. If you're a beginner or even a professional against the wall in the podcasting industry, stop on by podcastcadet.com. They have one-on-one personalized help, whether it's technical, design, marketing, what have you. Podcastcadet.com can help you out. Stop on by today. Podcastcadet.com. Use the code DUDES20 and you will get 20% off your purchase there. Tonight, I am so happy to have our guest tonight, James Cloud. His Excellency, the good Archbishop and Exorcist, is back on with us this evening. I am so excited to talk to him about the rite of exorcism, the process of exorcism, demonology, demoniac and demonic possession, and so much more in that realm. Before we get to all of that, let's check out this quick report from our in-house reporter, John Bound.
Now what do you have to say, Never Trumpers? As we leave one of the many foreign entanglements in Syria that George Washington warned us about, President Trump cuts the head off the snake.
Last night, the United States brought the world's #1 terrorist leader to justice. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead. He was the founder and leader of ISIS, the most ruthless and violent terror organization anywhere in the world. He died after running into a dead-end tunnel, whimpering and crying and screaming all the way. The thug who tried so hard to intimidate others spent his last moments in utter fear, in total panic and dread, terrified of the American forces bearing down on him. We were in the compound for approximately 2 hours, and after the mission was accomplished, we took highly sensitive material and information from the raid, much having to do with ISIS, origins, future plans, things that we very much want.
And have you notified the congressional leaders about the Pelosi?
We've notified some. Others are being notified now as I speak. We were going to notify him last night, but we decided not to do that because Washington leaks like I've never seen before. There's no country in the world that leaks like we do. And Washington is a leaking machine. And I told my people we will not notify them until our great people are out. Not just in, but out.
No matter how much they spend, the Never Trumpers will never be able to put their finger on the pulse of the American people. Amazingly, they are openly campaigning to return America back to the path it was on, as America spiraled towards an end to its sovereignty.
He's a complete isolationist, and he wants to will out of existence every other country in the world, it seems. America first, last, and always. Again, the president's ignorance in foreign affairs is maddening. He opposed our joining the Trans-Pacific Partnership on the ground that it would be dominated by China. Is the Trump administration coming anywhere near the future of work and the future of education? No, they're not. And you know why? Because it takes too much work.
With all of their whimpering from their echo chamber of collusion delusion, not one of these globalist tools can come to terms with the monumental accomplishment President Trump has doled out to the American middle class. In an article by Real Clear Politics, largely overlooked by the Mockingbird media, according to new Census Bureau data on the incomes of America's middle class, this study by former Census Bureau researchers and now statisticians at Sentier Research has found gigantic income gains for the middle class under Trump. The median or average income family has seen a gain of $5,003 since Trump came into office. Under George W. Bush, the household income gains were a little over $400 in 8 years, and under Barack Obama, Obama, the gains were 1,043. That was in 8 years for each. Under Trump, in less than 3 years, the extra income is about 3 times larger.
We are led by very, very stupid people. Very, very stupid people. We can't beat ISIS. Give me a break. We can't beat anybody. Our vets are being treated horribly. It will change. We will have so much winning if I get elected that you may get bored with winning.
Dubbing the politicians and their mockingbird media conspirers never Trumpers actually gives these goons of globalism too much credit. They should be called anti-populist, which ultimately adds up to anti-Americans. John Bound reporting.
And there you have it from John Baum, folks. Thank you so much for everything that you do, not only for the HC Universal Network, but for reporting, John. You do a great job over there at Daily News Collective. Stop on by, check that out. It's a great news conglomerate, great blog, great stuff going on over there. This evening, we are so pleased to have author, exorcist, Archbishop James Cloud on the show to talk with us about exorcism, demonology, demonic possession, all those and more. Like we do for many of our special guests on topics like this, we have taken the time to ask the latest technology, the same questions that we're going to be asking James Cloud tonight. So here is this segment of Ask Alexa with Dudes and Beer. Alexa, what is demonology?
The noun demonology is usually defined as belief in demons.
Alexa, what is a demon?
A demon is a supernatural and often malevolent being prevalent historically in religion, occultism, literature, fiction, mythology, and folklore, as well as in media such as comics, video games, movies and television series. The original Greek word daimon does not carry negative connotations. The ancient Greek word delta alpha mu omega nu daimon denotes a spirit or divine power, much like the Latin genius or numen.
Alexa, what is demonic possession?
Demonic possession refers to the state of one being controlled, either directly or indirectly, by a supernatural force, commonly of satanic origins.
Alexa, what is the rite of exorcism?
Here's something I found from the article Exorcism on Wikipedia. The rite of exorcism centers chiefly around driving out demons with prayers and contempt and includes the Apostles' Creed and Our Father.
Alexa, what happens to people who are possessed?
Here's something I found from the article Spirit Possession on Wikipedia. Most people who are possessed by the spirit describe the onset as a feeling of blackness or energy flowing through their body as if they were being electrocuted.
Alexa, what happens to people who have been possessed by a demon?
Here's something I found from the article Exorcism in Christianity on Wikipedia. In general, people considered to be possessed are not regarded as evil in themselves, nor wholly responsible for their actions, because possession is considered to be unwilling manipulation by a demon resulting in harm to self or others.
Alexa, what is the difference between demonic possession and demonic obsession?
This might answer your question. Demonic possession refers to the state of one being controlled, either directly or indirectly, by a supernatural force, commonly of satanic origins. Symptoms of demonic possession commonly claimed by believers include missing memories, altered personalities, convulsions, fainting, and spastic hand movements.
Alexa, how do you become an exorcist?
Sorry, I'm not sure. You have What Is My Unicorn Doing? Enabled. Do you want to open it?
Yes.
Your unicorn is having her tail neatly plaited by tree nymph.
And there you have it. Once again, just like whenever we ask Alexa what is a megalithic culture, we get invited to play with our magic unicorn. Welcome to our guest, Archbishop James Cloud. How are you doing this evening, Your Excellency?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
Doing great. Blessings to you and your family in this time as we head into the calendar of the holiday season. Please do.
And to you.
Thank you. Number one, how did Alexa do?
Oh, I'd give her maybe a B minus.
I mean, she's, for an algorithm, not bad with the ancient Greek.
No, not too bad.
But let's get into a little bit of your background real quick, just for the audience that is not familiar with you, that may be new to the show. Like all those awesome people up in the Poughkeepsie area. I've always wanted to say I got my stuff on in Poughkeepsie. Gotta let you know, folks. We are on during drive time on the fantastic, soon-to-be booming WMLD. You can check them out online on TuneIn Radio as well. So for what explain to our audience exactly what demonology is, how you came to be called, not necessarily to the seminary itself, because that can be a long story, but how were you called to the vocation of exorcist demonologist?
Okay, well, to answer the first question, demonology is really the study, the understanding of demonic forces, their origins, how they can be combated, and really what kind of powers or abilities are associated with various entities.
Okay.
But how I got into it, you know, I tell people, they look at me funny, but it's true. You know, you kind of use that old adage, but I switch it up for an exorcist. You know, the exorcist life I didn't choose the exorcist life. The exorcist life chose me, kind of thing. And, you know, ever since from the age of 4 and going down my family tree, specifically the maternal side, but also on the paternal side, we've had the sight. We've been able to see, hear. I get precognition. I'll know things before they happen. A lot of times I'll even get what I call place memories. It's actually, they call it post-cognition. I can touch things and get a full history on the object typically. It's just weird stuff. But
now explain to the audience, Father, that exactly how that jibes with church teaching, with faith, things like that. A lot of people would be like, "Oh my God, he's talking about like sorcery and witchcraft and things like that." You know, like because I'll admit the fact I am that way with crystals and rocks, things like that. Like I can feel them whenever I hold them. The same way that I feel the presence of my God whenever I'm in church. But explain to people how that goes with faith, and with, I guess not necessarily the articles of faith, but the teachings of faith.
Sure. So, well, in the Old Testament, the prophets of old, you know, they pretty much ran the gamut of abilities and miracles and senses and whatnot. In the New Testament, we know about the words of wisdom, words of knowledge, working of miracles, the healings, and other things that go along pretty much part and parcel with the things I've experienced all my life and elsewhere along the family lines. But of course, you know, the enemy always has counterfeits too. And so, you know, always have to gauge, you know, what is this? What's behind this person? If it's Christ, well, that's awesome. Most likely, it's a gift of the Holy Spirit. If they're not, most likely it's a counterfeit. Still potent, but not of God, powered by something else.
And what do you mean by powered by something else? Would that necessarily? I know in high magic, there is the concept of the egregore, which is not necessarily like a demonic force, but something that is created more like almost like a golem type entity created by the energy and will of other people. So what do you mean by control of something else?
Well, it can, I firmly believe we were created in the garden with a lot of abilities. But after the fall,
we spoke directly with God. Like we were running from him when after we ate the fruit. We were like, "Oh, geez, we got to get up out of here, man." It was very quick revelation that fruit brought about.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't know how long they lived in the garden before they fell.
Yeah.
So they could have been in the garden thousands of years, which would easily explain, Cain finding a wife.
Yeah.
But no, I think humans were, we were initially created immortal anyway in the garden. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had the directive not to eat of that fruit, otherwise we'll die.
Yeah.
So I think there was a lot that wasn't mentioned about human capabilities, human possibilities in the scriptures. And so it could be powered simply from a genetic source for all I know.
Oh, sure.
But it could also be, and it could easily be empowered by a demonic force as well.
Well, and that's one thing, just to step back for about half a step here, Father. The one thing that people tend to forget is that there are two concurrent stories in the Bible, in the book of creation, about the story of creation, rather. And specifically, there are two trees in the garden. One that man is not supposed to eat of, lest he become like God and know good from evil. The other is the tree of life, of which he could eat all he wanted. So yeah, like you said, we had many, many gifts and abilities according to the biblical text, and numerous stories of creation, not just the Christian story of creation. This is based, don't forget, folks, that actually comes out of the Torah, not just the Bible. It is also repeated in a few different texts, the story of creation, where there are two trees to choose from. And when they chose from the second, that's when banishment happened. That's when evil crept in. So take us from there, Father.
Well, getting back with the abilities one might have. I've known some very moral people that aren't into the occult or anything else, and they have gifts and are able to see here. And they're not overly religious either, but they have gifts and they do fine by them. Of course, I also have ran into others that actively seek out power, and I think it's the seeking of power. It's always been my belief that those that dive into the occult typically don't have power or control in their own life, so they seek that power and control from an outside source to feel strong and capable, almost untouchable. And, from the Christian perspective, we look to the Father for that. He is our protector, our strong rock. He's the one that builds us up. He's the one that, but of course that takes faith. And some people, even the scripture said, some vessels are made for honor and some for dishonor. Some people aren't capable or able.
Yeah, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Sure.
And who doesn't understand and empathize with that statement and truth of fact? We all strive to be something better. And I mean, you and I come at it from a Christian perspective. You, of course, wear a collar. I went to school to wear a collar at one point, left, continued in youth ministry, and have now continued on my own path. However, still attend church here and there, and, am a spiritual person daily that talks to my God. I will never, ever lose that special connection with my God, despite any issues I may have with a church as a whole.
Sure.
And that's just where I stand. But for a lot of people, this conversation is hard. For you and I, it's like sitting down to a game of canasta. It's something that we have both studied, something that we have both spent time in our life to devote ourselves to study, because we found it. Yeah. I found it, at least at the time, as know thy enemy. And more to that note, it's the fact of, when I say, I've always been a student of philosophy, theology, things like that. I loved them because they were very, very much akin to instruction manuals to me. I was never really into like novels. That was my brother. Give me a book on how to build lasers, and I was all about it. I'll give you a book report 20 pages long. So to me, studying things like this, studying things like demonology, studying things like spirituality, came naturally. For a lot of people, that's, like I said, a hard conversation. How do you broach this? Let's start getting into a little bit of the investigative nature, because that's really where the exorcism begins, far before we get into holy water, sacrament, words from the Roman ritual and beyond, and prayers of healing and more. Where does the investigation begin in an exorcism?
Well, usually begins when, like for myself and my exorcism team, when we get a call, be it from a church, an individual, sometimes a business. And then we go in to confirm or deny that something's actually up. Because sometimes, I'm also a mental health professional as well as a drug and alcohol counselor. I have the highest certification in Oregon for drug and alcohol addiction. So I'm able to bring in a lot of natural, explainable solutions to things that aren't necessarily supernatural or paranormal. And so I'm able to differentiate, is this a psychosis? Is it a substance-induced psychosis? Is it a mental health issue?
Sure.
Is it nutritional? Is it environmental? So one of the biggest thing is, for me, starting out of the gate, is seeing if this is a legitimate possession or haunting, and then if I can feel satisfied that all the other explanations don't fit, then I go forward with the religious piece. And so that's really, go ahead.
I was going to say, define the difference between a possession and a haunting.
Sure. Well, there are three primary stages. There's infestation. So infestation is your typical haunting, per se. This is when an entity is within a home, an environment, a business, a location, and they're making themselves known in one way or another. Usually they make themselves known, pretty benignly. They'll touch you, or, of course you'll be scared, but they're not actually attacking or hurting anything else.
This is the mischievous, almost poltergeist-like activity that you can see where you go to sleep with your phone on the bedstand and wake up and it's in the bathroom. and you don't have kids or a dog, things like that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And, or you might see an apparition walking down the hall or something, but it repeats the same path every night or something like that. And of course, in that situation, it's believed they're purgatorial souls. They're trying to get your attention so that you can actually pray for them and help get them gone, and help them work through that extra piece that they need to do to continue the journey. So, but then of course, infestation can also go to the extreme dark side, where they're being hit, slapped, scratched, even in some cases I've had raped, abused in pretty dark ways, even in their thoughts and nightmares while they sleep. So,
oh wow,
that can be infestation, and that's really the quote unquote haunted house, and it can really take a couple different flavors.
Okay, and get into the flavors that it can take on.
Well, so like, I can give actually examples for my own family. That's the easiest way.
Please, if you don't mind.
Oh, no, I don't mind at all. I tell folks I'm an open book. You just have to know which page to turn to.
And it's interesting because the things that you talk about, the one thing that I love about you is that you are willing to talk about this, that you are not a closed book. I mean, of course, you do all of this under the seal of confession. You aren't going to give out names, dates, places, locations, addresses. But you are open to talking about the fact that you have the gift and the sight. You do not call me a user of witchcraft because I've got crystals around me that I can feel. You talk about ghosts and spirits being purgatorial spirits as opposed to mini priests, or if you pick up catechisms will tell you that, like, nope, doesn't exist. And it's like, well, that's funny.
Yeah.
You're really asking me to believe in something that I can't see that is supposed to be triune in this great philosophic way, but that can't be seen either. Wait a minute. There's something very paradoxical here. So for you to be saying this, for you to be so open with this, there are so many men that wear the collar that are like you, that are afraid to come out and say anything. That's what people don't realize. So let's get into some of these. Thank you for that, by the way. And let's get into some of these examples from your family that you're talking about.
Sure. Well, hauntings and spiritual activity have been in our family lines for as long as anyone can remember. My mom, I remember sitting around, Christmas dinner with all the family, and my mom and her sisters would talk about living in a haunted yellow old Victorian home down in Stockton, California, out in what they call the islands. It's actually a big agricultural area, big farmlands and whatnot. And they would hear cars driving up the gravel driveway. They'd hear a door close. They'd hear the bottom stairs, the door at the bottom of the house open and shut. They'd run thinking it was my grandfather coming home. There was no car. There was no one around. They report, and this was over Christmas dinner, so, me as a kid, I'm going, well, crap, this is great. And
that's great Christmas conversation. Eli, that's awesome.
Yeah. Hey, how about Santa Claus and all that demon that's sitting over there? That's awesome.
You better not wake up while Santa's coming.
They'll get you.
That's worse than Krampus, man. Yeah. Wow.
I know, but that's the kind of stuff that was absolutely, it was normalized in the family because it happened so often.
Sure.
And so, after a while, I'm just rolling with it, and but they would see their Uncle Eli in a black suit with a black top hat walking along the second floor of that Victorian home. My aunts were choked out a couple times. They'd be scratched. My grandmother reported sitting in the living room and the wall started like bending and cracking, like almost like an old horror movie where you see the walls kind of breathing. And they said every day at 3 p.m. there would be what they explained was an explosion, quote unquote, under the house, and it would shake the house and everything, and the loud sound scare the crap out of everyone. But it was expected. You could set your time by it.
Interesting.
And, and they had the facilities and all the electric company, gas company, all the people come out and check, and they could never find a reason for it. And really, even though, and there was another time in the kitchen where a door led down to the cellar, and my mom and my grandmother were in the kitchen, and they looked up, they heard the doorknob shaking back and forth, and they looked over, and it was just shaking. So my grandmother, she opens the door, and nothing's there. When my grandmother was, I think said she was 2 or 3, one of those. This was back in like 23, 24. And she tells a story that my great-grandmother and her were laying in bed. They're just chilling. It was late night or early morning. I can't remember the exact time she told me. But my great-grandmother had her back to my grandmother, and she heard my grandmother kind of gasping for air and choking. And so my great-grandmother turned over to face my grandmother, her little girl in bed with her, and there was this black mass that had crawled up onto the bed and was choking out my grandmother.
Oh, no.
And, and so my great-grandmother, she was protecting her child. She was able to grab this thing and throw it against the far wall at the foot of the bed. And as it hit the wall, my grandmother said it let out this shriek and then slid down into the crack between the wall and the floor.
Oh, that's nice. Now, see, I myself have been privy to a visitation at the foot of my bed by a large black mass.
Okay.
And was sleep paralyzed or paralyzed at the time. Paralyzed is not a word. But I was suffering sleep paralysis at the moment, and this thing, I could feel it tugging on my foot as I woke up and regained consciousness and couldn't scream. It looked up at me and saw that I was awake, I guess, and took off and just kind of dissipated and went away. But that was one of the most surreal moments of my life, and always one of those that has never left me, has only steeled my belief in not only the hereafter and, like you said, purgatorial spirits, but the presence of true evil, which that is one of the few moments in my life where I have felt the cold abyss presence of true evil. And that's the only way I can explain it, folks. If you've ever like stepped up to the edge of Hoover Dam or something like that, and looked down, that small queasy feeling that you get for a second there, imagine suspending that over a period. That's the feeling.
That's a great analogy, actually. That's very close to what it feels like. Absolutely.
Yeah, and let's get a little bit now into, because we have about 30 minutes left. Let's get into at what point do you start suiting up, cassock, stole, putting everything in your bag that you need for the sacrament.
Okay. Basically what I do from that point onward?
Yeah, exactly. Let's get a little bit into the sacrament itself. I mean, what you can talk about. I mean, of course, many public libraries have an old copy of the Roman ritual. I happen to get mine at my old university book auction many years ago for like $10. But you're hard pressed to find an actual copy of the Roman ritual. They are pretty well kept, folks, for specifically for people like Archbishop James Cloud here. Get into this a little bit for our listeners that may not be familiar with the rite.
Well, the biggest thing I do before I go out is I will meditate on the Chaplet of Divine Mercy to really expunge myself of bad choices, bad decisions, sins, really get into a confessional situation so that the enemy basically has no ammunition to use against me. Because once it's forgiven, it's irrelevant as far as the enemy is concerned. So,
yeah,
that's really the initial step. And then there's certain prayers that you say when you put on the stole, the cassock, different things that go along really with celebration of Mass versus, an exorcism. They're very much the same, but basically I get my mind set on one outcome, so that I'm not sitting there like some of these Hollywood priests that you'll see in a movie or something. They're almost begging and asking the thing to leave versus coming in. See, I tell folks I don't go in as a negotiator. I go in as a SWAT team. It's not a matter of, gee, are they going to leave? No, they're going to leave. It's just, let's see if it's going to be quick or if it's going to be long. And either way is fine with me.
Yeah.
Because I'll go toe-to-toe.
You know what's funny is I told my wife today, and she laughed and said, I know what you mean, but that's just a funny way to say that. And I was like, I am so entirely glad for my show and connecting me with people like Archbishop James Cloud, because you never know when you may have to jam spiritually.
Yeah. Sure.
Like you never know when that's going to happen, when somebody will literally bring that through your threshold. It may not even be anything that you do, folks. It may be something that somebody else brings through your threshold and only gets in via your invitation, like a flea on a dog.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
Please continue. After the preparation for the sacrament itself, once you arrive on site and you are ready for everything, where do things go? What begins to happen?
Well, I'll use a fairly recent case, for example. A family had moved from a different state and were followed by demonic entities. And they were being attacked, and kids were being hurt, scratched, harassed in the middle of the night. And these are older kids, 13, 14. But maybe I think there was a younger kid, but all of them said the same thing. This dark figure attacked them, as well as like this pale gray humanoid troglodyte looking thing. And so they didn't, really know where it was from, how it got there, why it followed them, or anything. So after I prepped myself, and I usually really focus in, and, I ask the Lord to, tell me what you need to tell me. Let me see what what is unseen, so that I'm able to do my job the most effectively. And so as we were getting near the property, I felt this pressure pushing against me. It was like an atmospheric pressure where it changes and it feels like the air is spongy. Thick.
Wow.
And I get the little scouting parties in my own house before an exorcism, so that's nothing. You talk about shadows at the foot of the bed, I got stories, let me tell you. But anyway, when I got to the property, I sensed that there was something in outbuilding, as well as 3 different spots in the home before I even actually went into those areas. And I walked through the front door, and the cupboard door is opening and shutting and slamming itself back and forth, almost in like a poltergeisty type thing. And so I commanded it to stop, and the door immediately ceased its movement. And I kept walking through, and I usually like to do it alone because I have no problem walking through the darkness. I just get too mad to care. And so went into another room, felt a presence. I basically do like a reconnaissance. Once I have my boots on the ground, and I'm looking through, I'm able to fine-tune exactly what's happened, where it's happened. Even like for that property, it was the site of an old, come to find out, the information I got was that it was an old stop on the train rails from the coast of Oregon to the Rogue Valley. And I kept seeing blood and hearing screams, and saw an African-American man hanging from a tree. And I go, I just went, my God, what is going on here? And so a person on my exorcism team that does history searches, she said, oh yeah, this was, the brothel was just next door. The big tree that you keep focusing on was the old hanging tree. And they had lynchings there. She said,
that's nice.
Oh yeah, it was just, lovely. And then I saw hundreds of souls walking around. And come to find out, there was a lot of murders, fights that ended in accidental deaths, accidents in the area. So there was a lot. And then I went into the outbuilding, and there was this old, looked like a Native American bull head that was, just the bones, but it had the horns on it and whatnot. But they had painted a bunch of different glyphs and whatnot on it, and they'd shoved a horse's tail into the skull of the bull. And I thought, well, that's weird. But something kept telling me, this is a problem. And so I got on the horn with a Native American friend of mine, and he said, and I told him the backstory, that the previous owner had given it to the new owners as a good luck charm. Well, come to find out, that's the opposite. It's actually a curse.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was actually a cursed object. And I'm like, well, that's nice. And so when in the house, I saw a tall 6.5 foot-ish black shadow man with red eyes and a big cowboy hat on, it looked like, kind of. But it was the flat brim, not the curved brims. And then I saw the pale troglodyte thing as well. And so at that point, I got my exorcism team to start praying because, I'm not a one-man army. I go in as a team.
Yeah.
I might be the spearhead, but I've got to have my prayer warriors.
And that was one of the things that was not correct in The Exorcist. One of my favorite movies of all time. Just watched all 3 of them. And that was one of the things that they did not accurately portray. They showed a exorcist and an acolyte, like an assisting priest. There's normally that plus like a good 5 or 6 acolytes, a good 5 or 6 people outside with the family praying, trying to keep them protected. If anything goes on out there, coming in and grabbing one of the team to bring them out there. It is way more involved than just some beds shaking around and 2 guys at the end of it.
Yeah, and getting split pea soup on you.
Yeah, because as you said earlier, there's a phrase amongst the clergy folks, and that's those that are closest to Christ are the most targeted by the devil. Go check out the history of St. Augustine, even
Padre Pio.
Yeah,
he was a great example of it.
Absolutely. And also a mystic and somebody who had visions and was blessed and suffered the stigmata. So we should do a whole episode on Padre Pio sometime. Archbishop. He was
awesome.
He was a great spiritual influence for me. I loved his work. And like I was saying, not a lot of people. There's a lot of misportrayal and a lot of hype with exorcisms, especially exorcism movies. I really think, especially if you're going by what's in the ritual, The Exorcist probably came the closest to anything. There are actual passages in that are pulled right out of the right. The story of Damien Karras is very much echoed in you in the fact that he was a psychologist. That was his field of study for the Jesuits. So when he first went up there, he was not going up there with the concept of exorcism in mind at all. It took a lot of convincing for him to get to that point. Like I said, a lot of these movies make it seem like, oh, look, somebody woke up and they're in a different mood. Quick, get a priest. And that's just not the case. Sometimes these investigations can go on for like years before the exorcism actually happens.
Sure.
And like we were saying, it takes a whole team of prayer warriors, and these people are active targets by this evil that knows that they are sending out these vibes. They're connected to the same strings, So they can hear you playing the violin, so to speak. And what is that like for you to have? Because there's one thing, like I said, to of course be a priest and be a spiritual target in that way to begin with. For the manifestation of evil, and in all actuality, people, I'm not even playing here. But what is that like for you to paint your target in that spiritual way on your back? That's I mean, your faith must be incredibly great. Is all I can say. I've got some great faith in my God. But I don't, as much as I said that is always the path that I would have wanted to follow, I'd say maybe confessor more. Maybe the lighter side of the seal of confession, So, how do you feel leading up to an exorcism. Like you said, you literally have to start going to the spiritual gym like on a daily to begin with, but it's like it's the difference between running a 5K or 2 and then running a marathon in a month, you know?
Yeah.
Explain that to the audience what that is like.
Well, you're absolutely not wrong on the target of that target on your back or whatnot. I was talking about the scouting parties earlier. So before a major exorcism or haunting or whatnot, it's not uncommon for me to get a physical attack. So I have pictures of me having 3 scratches from wrist down to elbow that are bloody. I've been hit, pushed, had my name called, feeling the hot breath in my ear, seeing entities around my bed, and my wife has seen them too. We always know that some case is coming up when the activity ramps up. One day my wife was with my son's speech therapist downstairs because he has autism, and she heard a large growl come out of the computer room behind the living room, and both her and the therapist heard it, and it was before a big case, of course.
Oh, wow.
And then she heard what sounded like my son calling her name, and we have those child gates that latch shut. She heard it shake, and then my quote-unquote son's voice calling out for mama from over there. We regularly hear people on the second floor walking around, or I should say things walking around. But if I always tell them, you know what, I don't care if you're around here, but if you get rowdy, I'm kicking your butt. And that's the way it's going to be. And they don't play.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I was telling you pre-show, I just went and spoke at a podcast conference. Way to go, Texas PodCon. Shout out to you guys, helping so many people get the fire underneath them to go out and start podcasts. And I loved speaking. And when I was there, one of my fellow panelists, Jared from Forged Audio Network, was speaking on a panel with me. I went to go be on a podcast that he's getting ready to start. I don't want to drop the name on air because I don't think he's ready to launch it yet. But we were recording some preseason episodes, and it's kind of a tell your story, type situation. And I told my story at the end of it. We were talking about this drop of blood that we saw in the bed, and at that moment, the bathroom door that was closed opened behind me and swung open. And we both kind of looked at each other, and we looked at the door, we looked at each other, and I was like, I've been here an hour and a half. That's been closed, right? It's like, yep. And I went down later, told the security guard, and I told them what room number I was in, and he was like, let me ask you, did the toilet flush or did the door open? Because that happens in that little block of rooms between the second, third, and fourth floor all the time. And proceeded to tell me all kinds of other stories. How often, and this is something that I don't think people realize, whenever I say target painted on you, just to go back to that reference and conversation real quick, Father. Before we do, actually, let me make sure to sign off here. Thank you so much to all of our listeners once again in the Hudson Valley tuning in during their drive time. WMLD there, the voice of the Hudson Valley. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want to hear the rest of this episode, please do join us online. Dudesandbeer.com is where you can find the full episode with Archbishop James Cloud about demonology, exorcism, and fighting demons in the real world. Now back to our conversation here. It's strange having that target fully painted on you, it is a true danger bringing something back with you. Even without invitation, like at the end of The Exorcist, Damien Karras finally he knows he's not of faith enough to beat Pazuzu, and to take him through sacrament. So he finally says, hey, I must be a much more tasty morsel than this one, being a servant of God. Take me instead, and allows the demon to take over. Now, you don't do that.
No.
Oh, no. But
nope.
How frequent is it that you, one of your team, people that you know, even people attached to you, family members, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, have something tag along after the rite is performed and after this exorcism of this individual or place is finished?
Well, it does happen mostly with the exorcism team. It's kind of a funny, odd example, but after my exorcism team and I had completed a case, we all went back to my house and kind of debriefing and, talking out, what happened, why it happened, because I still had a newer individual on the team at the time, and it was kind of a learning session. And my Amanda on my exorcism team, she said goodnight and she walked out, and about, maybe 10 seconds later, she comes running back in the house and saying her car's possessed. I looked at her, I'm like, what? Are you crazy? And she goes, no, really, come look. And sure enough, the lights were flashing on and off. The car was shaking. It was a Yukon, and it was shaking back and forth and bouncing, and it was going hog wild over there. And so I grabbed the holy water, and I kept thinking, why are you playing with a car? This is dumb. But okay, fine. And I basically rebuked it and threw holy water on the car, and immediately it stopped. The lights went off, car was fine, and it took about maybe 20 minutes to convince her it was probably safe to drive home.
Oh, wow.
But,
yeah,
that's a demonstrable occasion when something followed us home.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like I was telling you before the show, after that incident with him, and the night before that, I went to sleep probably about 11 o'clock, was answering some emails, doing some preparation on a PowerPoint, things like that, went to sleep, cut my computer off, woke up in the morning, and there was a screw on my keyboard.
Oh, how odd.
Now, there was no screw on my keyboard. That night was the night of the incident at his room. And what's more interesting is 2 days later, some of you may be listeners of my Talking Sound podcast. If not, if you're a technician, go check it out. Pretty fun. But I had a power brick, that could do like 12 volt, 5 volt, 9 volt, whatnot. And I had just purchased it, charged it, unplugged it from the wall, and went to San Antonio for 2 days. Been sitting there for a day. I go to use the restroom, and it sounds like running water in my ear. And I look over, and on my workbench, this battery is now shooting out a 3-foot flame with sparks along with it. I just got done clearing my studio today so that we could do this episode live tonight. It was so bad, man. I had to go out and buy a shop vac air compressors. I went through like a whole 5-pack of industrial size wet wipes, wiping down gear, everything else. It's been insane. But the one thing that dawned on me, especially as I am preparing to expose the audience to you, and this message is, oh my sweet Jesus. Are you joking right now? Could all of these things be tied together?
Sure.
You know, could it even be something, because it wouldn't be the first time, like I said, that something has poked, prodded, or played with me.
Sure.
So for me, it's absolutely like not beyond the realm. If anything goes down, like I said, I'm glad that I have you, sir, who is spiritually prepared to jam. I don't care what the airplane ticket costs. I will have you like helicoptered in like Bear Grylls, dude.
Hey, sounds good. Let me at him.
But it's odd to me that there are people out there, Archbishop, that are religious and do not believe in this. That there are people who wear the collar that do not believe in this, that do not believe in and like I said, for me, I find that hard. Like I could go hear mass from you all day. You know, but I find that a hard one to bite from somebody that says that they are of faith and does not believe in ghosts, demons, angels, things like that. Stuff from the, I guess you would say paranormal, but I wouldn't say paranormal from the pre-existence, I guess. From the time before man, I guess. You know, at least by all history, by all written history and accounts of mankind and angels, demons, jinn. We were going to get into that a little bit tonight, and I'm glad that we're touching on it now because King Solomon was one that was, interestingly enough, connected with God. One of the few people to not necessarily walk with God, but to talk on a personal basis with him, one-on-one on the daily, having connection beyond having to be in the temple, beyond having to be near the ark or anything like that. And he was granted power and dominion over angels, demons, and jinn. And this was, of course, before the order of the priests of Melchizedek.
Sure.
Is that right? Is that right? Wait a minute. Feel free to call me out.
No, that was after the order of Melchizedek.
Was that after the order of Melchizedek? Okay, so it was.
Yeah, so Abraham was with Melchizedek.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So thank you for correcting me on that. See, folks, I'm not afraid to. I'm not afraid to backpedal like a penguin whenever I know I'm wrong. Because it's been a minute or two, you know, and that's just like 5,000 years of history to have crammed in your head. That's all. But it's interesting to me that he was entrusted with this power. Why do you think Solomon was entrusted above all men with this power? Now, granted. We all have the power through baptism to cast out demons, to command them to leave with words of great power, and we will definitely get into those in just a few minutes. But this is what leads up to those words of great power. Is this right here? And that's why I would like you to get into this a little bit. Why do you think God granted Solomon, amongst everybody else, this incredible power?
Well, God gave Solomon a choice. He said, I'll give you riches, I'll give you power. What do you want to run the nation? And Solomon basically said, I don't want either one. I want wisdom to be able to rule the people justly. And that so impressed God that he wasn't a lesser man that sought riches or power, that he gave him all three. And that's why it occurred. And then, of course, you see later Solomon wrote, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. At some point, he let those things get into his head and pride crept in. And as he neared the end of his life, he understood that really he had to go back to the beginning. Possessions, things, power, all that fades. Moth and rust corrupt, as the scripture says.
Yeah.
You die, you can't take it with you. Someone else gets it, probably squander it and do whatever. So all that you are, take with you is your faith and wisdom. In reading the scriptures, wisdom is to be treasured above everything. It's the key to understanding God and man, and even beyond. And that's something, people often ask me, well, what's the big secret? What's the secret to life? I tell them it's actually easy. It's relationships. It's relationship to God and men. And that is the purpose of life.
Yeah,
to have that relationship.
Beautifully said. It's as my spiritual director, Father Andy Colzo, used to tell me. It's learning to see the God in men, and that capacity for God, in the way that God forgives you.
Exactly.
And that you should seek that in yourself. For empathy for other men, to be able to forgive so willingly, so readily, so easily, to forget afterward. And it's so beautifully said to hear that echoed in what you just said. And I think really, when it comes down to it, I think that as we talk about words of power here, the one thing that comes into my mind more than anything, talking about Solomonic magic, things like that, is of course the roots of the Kabbalah. And one of like I said earlier, it's not necessarily a know your enemy. It's that I want to be ready for any spiritual conversation that comes up, and to see these, ties between even modern faith, the modern religion, and the Kabbalah, and where it roots into the magic of Solomon and the connection of Solomon to the angels and demons and jinn. It's so interesting. I've never heard the relationship with God broken down better than Kabbalah, because of course in Kabbalah a lot of numbers come into play. Every letter in the Jewish alphabet is assigned a number. The number that represents one is the character for God. And no number can exist without God. And it's like, wow, dude, did you just mathematically prove God? Like that. The simplicity behind it was so great. But to take it a step further was the fact that even in the scripture where it says that we were breathed life into, that means that we were cohabitating the Spirit of God within us. The universe, creation was spoken into being. Now, this is where those words of power come in, folks. This is where the roots of those words of power come in. And how we all participate in this, willingly or unwillingly, whether you choose to believe it or not. You are participating in a point of manifestation. because you have that divine spark in you amongst all other creatures on earth. You also have the being to be able to impart things into the world by speaking. This is why words matter more than actions, way more than actions. I could probably come up and punch the good father in the gut and then give him a hug and say, "What's up, buddy?" You know, now we've never met before, but you get what I'm talking about.
Sure.
If I were to come up and start calling your faith, your practice, your flock into question, the way that you are as a man, something like that, that carries a totally different weight to it.
Sure it does.
And, you know, we manifest these things in the world around us, whether or not we want to be a spiritual person, believe in the true presence of evil. The fact is that we manifest these bad things. When we are negative toward other people, when we do invite that mean, hard, cutting sarcasm that can more hurt somebody than actually be a joke. And we open the door to these things. We allow this to happen.
Yep.
So how do you, I mean, of course you were saying that you go to confession before you get ready for the rite. The rite is, of course, performed under the seal of confession. What can people, I mean, of course, people of faith can go to confession, confess yourself to your Lord daily, whatever. But what can people do to keep themselves right and prepared in a spiritual way on a daily, even if they aren't Catholic, you know, even if they aren't of faith, but are of spiritual basis? What can they do to prepare themselves for this daily battle, Father?
Well, you know, the biggest thing that a person can do is remember that they're the creation and he's the creator. He's actually the one in charge. Because any other understanding of the hierarchy of authority is pride. No man or woman is God. Even though some like to say, you know, I control my own life, I don't need anyone else, yada, yada, yada. At the end of the day, you're the creation. He's the creator. And we live, breathe, and move under his rules. He made our lungs. He made our brains. He made everything. And no matter how much a person may want to struggle against that, the simple matter is we don't exist without him. Therefore, it's only right we give him thanks and praise, and that we try to have a solid relationship with him. Not that he's this dark overlord and gonna, you know, like Zeus with a lightning bolt kind of thing.
No.
But, you know, the scriptures say we can call him Abba, which basically translates in English as daddy.
Yeah.
Hey, daddy, I had this terrible day. Hey, daddy, I'm struggling right here. Would you listen to me and help me out here? What can you advise? That kind of thing.
You know,
not that God needs us, but he wants us.
Oh, no, absolutely. Who does? I mean, hey, your parents don't need you either. You know what I mean?
No.
But they like to hear from you, folks. You know, drop a text. Heck, if they're on Facebook, drop them a Facebook message. Drop them a funny GIF or something. Let them know that you're thinking about them. They love you. I had a very good friend of mine that was just going through some stuff, and he went to his cardiologist office and was like, wow, you know, I never thought that I would be coming into this building after coming here for so long for my mom, that I'd be coming in here for myself. And I was like, you know, man, number one, I guarantee you that you chose that place for your mother and vetted it because it was the best. So you're dealing with nothing but the best, I assure you. Number two, you're doing your mother a great honor and a great service by taking care of the son that she loved for her whole life. You know, you are fully honoring that charge of honor thy father and mother. You couldn't honor your father and mother in a better way than to take care of your health and spirituality, folks. They wanted nothing but the best for you. So that's the best you can do. I don't care if you're Catholic, Buddhist, if you go out and like sit under a tree on the daily with a crystal or talk to dogs. Believe in something greater than yourself because you're part of something greater than yourself, whether you want to believe it or not. You are the pebble being thrown in the pond. It's up to you how big of a ripple you make.
Yep.
Now, when you and your team are actively engaged, how long? Because I mean, there are stories from people like Malachi Martin of exorcisms going on for months, even sometimes over the course of years. How long is a normal case for you guys once you have stepped foot into the realm of the rite itself?
You know, I would say probably most of the time, the greater percentage, it's over and done with after an hour, on average. There are cases, however, that for whatever reason, there's deeper hooks, deeper attachments that lie within a person's life. Or if it's in a haunting and it's as a result of choices in a family, in that family's life, that still need to be addressed.
And explain that, because that really goes back once again, straight back in ancient Hebrew and Kabbalistic teaching with things like the sins of the father, that kind of stuff. Explain what you mean by things done by family.
Well, you know, there's a lot of things we all do or have done in our lives that even the fathers, you know, they've even proven that there's a genetic memory, that we inherit certain memories in our genetic code from our forefathers.
Oh, absolutely.
And you know, I believe that goes part and parcel with that idea of sins of the fathers, that it has a unseen yet palpable influence on our lives. And so really what a person needs to do is to, you know, examine, one, their family history, and even in their own lives. You know, there's times things are done out of a state of ignorance, not ignorant like dumb, but ignorant of lack of knowledge, that we've opened doors, and we may not even be aware of the doors that we'd opened. And so there's been cases like from my own cases that there's time I use my psychology degree to help counsel and to go through and to figure out, well, what are you forgetting? You know, what are some things that you went through in early childhood that's now keeping doors open for you that you actually don't want to open, but they are. And so it's a process sometimes. Other times, I go in, you know, I get called all sorts of names, things start literally flying around or whatnot. I address it, I talk directly to it, and then it's done. You know, I had a case, well, I guess it was maybe 3 months ago, of possession, and the possessed person kept saying, it's not going to leave. It's not going to leave. I said, buddy, I want you to think two things.
Not with that attitude, it's not.
No, for one, yeah. Primarily, yeah.
You ever just want to go like tough love football coach on it? Like, take a salt tablet. We're going to get into this now. You know.
Yeah. Actually, sometimes I do.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to make light of like the most torturous thing in the world, which is the spiritual battle with the enemy that is evil incarnate.
Sure.
But it just jumped in my mind. That's the first thing I'd say. It's like, well, not with that attitude, nothing's going to leave. Come on, guy, work with me.
Well, you know, a lot of times that's actually pretty much what I tell them. You know, you have to want to fight too. It's not just my fight. This is your fight too. And unless you want to be at its whim at any given time, it's time to get real and to fight and to set your life right. And it's time to stop playing.
You know, I couldn't bring something up at a more poignant moment, and that is the point of demoniac obsession, which is a step that many people come to and do not evolve beyond into the point of possession. But demoniac obsession, folks, is where a force outside of yourself is influencing you to do things that you would normally not do. Like you randomly start using hard drugs on a regular basis and start doing horrible things to attain them. Now, these are ways through which the enemy enters. These are ways through which spirituality is weakened and other doors are opened. This is something that Father Malachi Martin talked about all the time, was that he saw as he walked the streets after his release from vocation and just into general practice, that he saw the black eyes in people of the demonically obsessed that were on the verge and did not know it.
Yeah.
How prevalent do you see that in the world around us? Especially, not necessarily that people aren't religious or that there aren't just as many religious or more religious than normal. I mean, the numbers grow every year, folks. Believe it or not, the world is not as spiritually crushing as you might think. There are many people out there outside of this great country and land, and they are way more religious than we are on all fronts.
Yeah.
You think we got something going with like EWTN. We got nothing on the religion and spirituality of other nations of this world. We could learn a thing or 20 from them about devotion and devotion to vocation. But it's hard for a lot of people, like I said, to grasp this. What is the percentage? Because a lot of people are kind of like, oh, that's like voodoo. You gotta believe in it for that to work. You know, what is the percentage of cases that you take on where the person was not of religious or spiritual nature?
Best guess, I'd say about 40% that aren't active in any religion or whatnot, but yet, for one reason or another, they're targeted. But you know, I tell people they have got to remember that demons and these dark entities are like lions on the Serengeti. You watch a National Geographic or whatnot, yes. You'll always see the lion go for the young, the old, or an infirmed animal because they're easier to catch.
Yep.
It's a quicker meal. You know, they're able to have their predation and go for it. It's the same way with these entities. They look for youth and inexperience. They look for a spiritually weak person, which may or may not even be their own fault. There may be some other thing in that person's life that tickled a particular fancy of an entity or a demon. But regardless, there is a reason why the scriptures say your enemy is a lion seeking someone to devour.
Yes.
It's active, both within and without of the church. And, you talk about the black eyes, the motivations and whatnot. There's a couple of things I would add to that, is that, within the church, there is such beauty, but there's also such darkness. Because mankind is involved in the process, as well as obsessions.
Yeah, exactly.
And quite honestly, it boils down to this. There's some that play church and some that are the church. And there's a big difference between the two.
Indeed. I couldn't have said it better myself, and that is the line that I have towed for years and years and years. Is that if the actions of any one man are what make you leave your faith, you may want to consider that. He is no indication of your faith. He is but a man and just as flawed as any other.
Yeah.
And
people ask me, you must be really holy. And I look at him and I go, are you kidding me? I have all of the same flaws, all the same. I make dumb decisions all the time.
I ain't got no damn time to be holy.
I'm just trying to do a job here, guys. I'm trying to do my job, and I have to rely on grace each time. Yeah. A little bit like Constantine, I've been told, but it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing, there's a difference between a peccata and a mortal sin. I doubt seriously the devil would be like, I saw that 6-pack of Molson you had during the game. Molson. Well, I don't know. He might if you were drinking Molson.
Yeah, might.
Even I'll make fun of you if you're drinking Molson, everybody.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're talking about. I mean, when you go to confession, it is because you have things that have troubled you. And just recently, my wife and I had the conversation, and she was like, that's not what confession is. And I was like, oh, my dear, are you serious? Like, I am so sorry for you. I guess I've been very blessed to know priests personally my whole life, and to just always know when they were in the confessional and go to them, and not be afraid to do a face-to-face confession.
Sure.
I always enjoyed that more. But for me, it was very much, it was this, and frequently I might tell people that were like just kind of sitting in the pew next to me waiting, writing their list, be like, sorry, I hope you don't have plans. Like, that light ain't gonna go green for a quick minute.
Yeah.
Hope you brought a few dollars for the candles, because you're gonna get bored, yo. Because for me it was a scouring process. It was a scrubbing, and this is the preparation. Spiritually, much like the preparation of the spiritual baths before the high priests entered the temples, in times of Christ, things like that. So, what part of the sacrament have you found that you carry? Because knowing priests my whole life, I always hear that they carry different parts of the sacrament with them. In addition to your normal sacraments that you administer, what do you personally carry with you that you find unique experientially in your spirituality?
I carry several things. I have a blessed cross of St. Benedict. I have several hosts in my kit that are consecrated. And of course, they're kept safe while in storage. And then, of course, holy water. It really boils down to I want to know that I'm doing all I can with every tool God has given me. At the end of my life, talking about tools and whatnot, sacraments. At the end of my life, I don't want to stand before God and have Him say, I gave you all these things, all these gifts, all of these abilities, and you just sat there because you were too scared. You just sat there, you didn't move forward, and I'm certain that that's in alignment with the parable of the talents. You're given these abilities, these gifts, this. I'm kind of one of the dumb guys when it comes to being scared. I'm all fight and no flight. So if I get scared, let me tell you, I see some scary things. But it makes me mad, and I lash out. And so what it does is it makes me dig my heels in even further, because it's something I also tell folks when they say, I'm scared, I don't know what to do, I don't think God hears me. I just, put a hand on their shoulder and tell them, I want you to look up at the sky. And they're like, what? And because it's usually at night when something goes south. And I said, I want you to look at those stars, the galaxies, the universe. You're telling me that an entity, a demon, that its power and influence is in a home. Oh, it's making scary sounds. It's doing this. Or something's going on, but it's all localized. It's nothing grandiose. It's scary to us because we're humans and whatnot. But I said, you look up at the universe. The God who spoke those galaxies into existence, he's the one who authored space-time. He's the one who authored the ecological balances on the earth, the tides, the seasons. He's the one who put the sun into place and causes it to shine. You're telling me that you think this little punk demon is more powerful than the God of creation? And it's like it clicks sometimes for the very first time that, because I tell them, what's a demon? A little gnat compared to the Almighty. These demons can't even hardly, when they're cast out, they're tripping over themselves, running out of a location or a person. The God of the universe is sitting up there and just going, I got you back. You just have to have faith and believe. And so, anything that increases my faith, brings me solace and helps me to remember that God of creation that I'm actually there to represent to someone who's hurting or to someone who's going through something. If it increases my faith, I'll carry that sacrament with me. I carry the body because it is the body of Christ. I carry that holy water because it reminds me of the sacrament of baptism when life is renewed. The cross of St. Benedict, it says, Satan, drink your own poison. Get thee behind me.
Yeah.
All of these things that embolden, empower, and bolster my faith. That's what I bring, and I try to share that faith to those that feel helpless, and let them know y'all not helpless. You've got a God that loves you, wants the best for you. You know, he's seeking to do good, not evil. But you've got to have faith, and you got to come to him with humility. And that's the other key I think I was talking about earlier. You know, to really have that relationship with God, you have to have humility.
Yeah.
Because God cannot and will not work with a prideful person.
No. Well, I mean, do you want to work with a prideful person?
No.
I just got done at that podcast conference with a whole bunch of business coaches, and they were like, you learn after a few years to rapidly spot through a few questions the people who are not teachable, and that you should not let drag your life down. These are the people that lead to bad habits. These are the people that lead to the want of you wanting to numb your empathy for other people because you let them be a drain on you. Once again, I'll repeat, you let them be a drain on you. Never forget that devil can never get in without your explicit permission. It cannot walk through your door. If there are people that are these psychic vampires that are taking this energy from you on the rags and you continue to let them through your door, whatever is attached to them, making them like that, will gladly sit around you because you quite obviously will let it in on the rags. And you really do have to learn to see it this way, folks. It's a life-changing concept. You can talk about people like, you understand, Father. I understand it from a Catholic point of view and from a spiritual point of view as we see it. I'm trying to explain it to people in a universal view. And you know, whenever you do have these people, and we all know them, that are just, whenever they leave, you're like, oh my God, like, oh, and you don't want to be with them, but you continue to be with them. This is what spiritually wears you down. When you continually give and give and give and give, eventually you have nothing left in your cup for your own sustenance, literally. And this is when the moments of weakness happen. This is when we fall into, like I said earlier, that ever so close abyss that we are all close to forever and always. And once you've tapped into that and learned to see it, I myself have had my time of addiction. So I know what it was to go into something that was utterly not me. And do things for that were utterly not me. And I surrendered to that. I did that. And it, you know, it took a long time for me to get to the point of personal salvation with that, not the knowledge of salvation. Despite, you know, like I knew when I talked to my God and confessed and everything else, even in confessional, that I was forgiven in that right. But for me to forgive myself took many, 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 many years. For me to become
the hard part.
For me to become the happy individual that I am, especially being somebody who had taught people about this stuff. And that's what I tell my wife, is that, you know, that makes you more susceptible, but it also makes you more accountable for that decision. You know, and it's a hard double-edged sword to know, because once you know, you can't unknow. You know, that was kind of the mean joke that we used to play on each other in the seminary. Is like, you know, that's a sin, right? Well, now you know. Sorry, bro. Sorry. There goes that one for you. You know,
now you're accountable. Good
exactly
luck.
Now you're accountable for it. Just being good for you. You'll thank me years from now, trust me. You can stop some parties real quick with that game, I guarantee you.
Man,
but
that'd drag it down real quick.
But I mean, aside from religion, I think people just don't have a spiritual barrier anymore. I think that we have lost a general spiritual grounding. I think we have societally lost the allowance for a spiritual boundary. I agree. Through a collective disbelief, through really more a collective discountance than a collective disbelief. I think more people would really fit into the agnostic category, where something's out there, but it doesn't really affect me. You're there too, so yeah, it does. Like, litter and say it doesn't affect something. You know? So I don't grasp that concept. I don't like in my mind philosophically get where that comes from. What can people do to learn to ground themselves spiritually on the daily to I guess steel their resolve? I always used to tell the kids that I taught CCE to, you should thank your God twice a day. Once when you wake up for the opportunity one more day to do the things that you love, to be with the people that you love, to take the time to see those things that he may be sending your way. And then at the end of the day to say, hey, that was pretty cool. Like that was nice. You know, that's the least you can do. You saw how quick that was. I was sitting here watching the counter. That was less than a minute. And that was both of those. And if you can't take the time, like 30 seconds while you're in the shower, not drowning presently, to thank the universe that you're still there, man, you're a special something, is what I'll say. And I'll be the one to say it. 'Cause like I said, it ain't about Jesus or hierarchy or church or patriarchy or anything like that, people. It's about just believing in something greater than yourself and the fact that you are an active part of it. That's all I ask. That's all that we ever ask on this show. I know the good Father, at least spiritually, agrees with me there. There are some different things when it comes down to transubstantiation, the Eucharist, and if we wanted to get into actual church teaching. But when it comes to a general philosophic concept, that's the gist of it, folks. You know, like you gotta take care of yourself. You gotta look out. You gotta learn to trust that squirrely little feeling behind your belly button. You know, when you feel that, it may not be your lunch. You know, think about it, pray on it. Take the time to get comfortable with how you feel when you're happy. I think that's probably one of the most important things to do. Because when you're happy, you're calm, you're static. And when you can learn to kind of get that general feeling, then you can definitely feel when the opposite of that is even entering the room. And at that point, it's a different level. So what do you associate with the enemy, Father? Whenever you are in the presence, what do you feel?
Boy, it every case is similar and every case is different. At the same time, I think the most common feelings, sensations I'm in the presence of evil, it is that it's like a pressure, but it's a mixture of that and that feeling, like you were saying earlier, looking over the Hoover Dam down at the water. Yeah, you're leaning over the edge, and it's that kind of feeling.
That slight queasy drop that happens for a second.
Yeah, but it takes that and then add on creepiness. Like you just got so creeped out. You're like, oh. Dear Lord.
I tell my...
add the two. Yeah, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Finish what you were saying. I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
Oh, you're fine. I just was going to say add the two, and that's about it right there.
Yeah, because, I mean, I've told my wife before, she's asked me, because I've told her, like, in no uncertain terms, yes, I have felt the presence of true evil. Like, I've felt it. I've felt it there. And for me, it was one of those things that I'll never forget. It was utterly visceral. Like I said, like I tell her, it was a feeling like somebody actively scooped me out.
Yeah.
Like somebody just reached in with a hand and just scooped your belly out. And you were just like hollow inside and slowly refilling. Like that's what it felt like. And still feels like whenever I start getting the feeling that something is just beyond not right. And you know, what could the biggest thing that you could tell people to do to protect themselves spiritually, Father? What can they do to start growing a little closer to God?
Look at, it almost gets back to that philosophical, existential idea of look at the stars, look at the galaxies, look at the universe, look at the mountains, the streams. Understand that we're all part of something bigger and try to connect to that bigness. Because if we can connect to the bigness, we're not that small, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely it makes sense. And I want to thank you so much for coming on, sharing your vast realm of knowledge. I know you have services in the morning, you have a family yourself, thank you so much, not only for your time here, but for your vocation, for the work in Christ and the work in the world that you have chosen, despite ridicule, despite leering eyes from other people. Thank you. Thank you for what you do for all of us on the daily. You're
welcome.
To keep us spiritually right and spiritually whole. You have a beautiful mission, and I greatly, greatly appreciate you for it.
Well, I appreciate that. I can only walk the path God has given.
Absolutely.
And beyond that, I'm happy enough.
Well, on that note, where can everybody go to find out more about you, more about your book, Walking with Ghosts, an Exorcist Memoir of the Paranormal, more about the Order of St. Michael the Archangel, any priests or deacons out there looking to go be exorcists or acolytes in an exorcismic team? Where can these people find this information? Where can they go?
There's several places. We have our exorcism team's website. It's the Paranormal Research Investigators in St. Michael. I'm also able to be contacted by email, bishopcloud@yahoo.com. Pretty straightforward and easy there. The book can be found on Amazon. It's an ebook as well as softback.
My softback cover gets here on Friday, folks. The shipping was delayed a little bit, but which I'm sure is because of fires and the like in California. Every package I've had from Amazon lately has been delayed, but I can't wait. I got my Kindle version today on my tablet, so that is going to be one of my favorite airplane books. I can't wait.
Yeah, you'll be able to read about my family's history, some cases I've been on, my early childhood experiences, as well as an abduction case I had with myself at age 4.
Wow. I would love to have you back on to talk about your abduction experience.
Definitely.
That would be intriguing and incredible, Your Excellency. Thank you so much once again for taking the time out this evening. Please do hold the line while we close things out. While you are online checking out the Paranormal Investigative Society of St. Michael, is that correct?
Paranormal Research Investigators of St. Michael.
Oh, yep. Research Investigators. I almost had it. That's an awesome title, too. While you're online checking them out, make sure to stop on by dudesandbeer.com. That is where you can find all the episodes. That is where you can find all the content. We're soon going to be relaunching Thinking Deeply. I can't wait. We'll definitely have to have the good Archbishop on Thinking Deeply. Make sure to check everything out on the HC Universal Network, podcastcadets.com. Also, make sure to stop on by audibletrials.com/dudes and beer, audibletrial.com/dudes and beer, and you'll get 33 days of Audible. Talk to you later, everybody. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and if you can't be good at it. Bye-bye.
For Android and iDevices, available on Google Play and iTunes markets. For more episodes, content, and information, visit us online at dudesandbeer.com. You can also find our episodes on Breach.tv, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service. Dudes and Beer is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more about our sponsors and other podcasts on this network, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, drink responsibly.